Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again in this April Hangouts. And today we have a couple of interesting updates for you. We have some product updates, we have some stuff going on in the community, and we have two great speakers who are going to be talking about extending n8n by creating custom integrations. So you may have run into that point where either we do not have a node for the app that you need, or we do have a node and it doesn't have the method or the operation that you need. Well, after today, you will know exactly how to fix that and how to build your own solutions and just move your project along. What it's going to look like, I'm going to be starting with some community updates today first. Then I have a word from our hiring department. We have a couple of interesting jobs that I want you guys to be aware of. Product updates, I have a couple of things that are live and in production now, and I can give you a glimpse of some stuff that we are working on. So I think that's going to be exciting. And then Amudan, community member, is going to be speaking about using the HTTP node for custom API requests. And Bram is going to talk a bit about creating custom n8n nodes. And so that's not going to be an in-depth workshop, but it's going to show you about like the pros and cons and when to use it and like what the strengths and weaknesses are. So first point, I would like to introduce to everyone the n8n navigators. We've been working together for a couple of weeks now. And what happened is we realized that we had a group of highly active users on the forum who are providing support to each other. And we wanted to encourage them and to support them as well by giving them a more direct link to the n8n team, by giving them a more direct link to each other, and by giving them a bit more, a few more tools on the forum to make it easier to see what needs to be solved and what not. And the forum members that we have in this team right now are Barnack, Bram, who's also here, Ihortom, I'm not sure if Ihor is here today, and Liam, who is here. I just saw him, so that's great. So you have probably already noticed a lot of questions from them. And yeah, you will continue seeing them too. We're also developing a bit of extra exclusive swag, like merchandise for them. So we hope to have that in the course of this quarter. Everyone gets a free pro plan, and if you are interested in joining this team, or if this is something that you like doing, just become active on the forum, and we'll pick up on it, and we'll see you. I need to switch one setting here for myself. Okay. Right. So next, hang on, I'm missing one slide. It's not doing what I want. Yeah, here we go. Stuff that's in progress in the community team. This quarter, we're going to be launching a community newsletter. So we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about to you guys, and we haven't been really great at doing that. And so we want to have a monthly update sharing new features and new solutions for things you can work on with n8n. We will be sharing community stories, sharing like featured templates, etc. So it's going to be really interesting mix of community and product updates, and I think you're going to enjoy it. We're currently implementing everything, and I think we'll have something in the next month and a half or so. So keep an eye out for that. Then we are developing an ambassador program, and that's a bit of like a nebulous word, right? It could be all kinds of things, and we're trying to figure out what it could mean for us. But some things that we definitely have in mind is the navigators could be part of that. We're also thinking about physical meetups. So we would like to have local events where you could meet up with interested people. And we'd like to do that worldwide. So we'll be looking for people who can assist us in hosting these things. And we will support that with suggested program, with like merchandise, with some, being able to expense some costs like drinks and snacks for your people, etc. So yeah, more about that this quarter as well. And also for our shop, we want to have a bit of new merchandise. So we've had t-shirts and some things for a long time, and we would like to expand that range with some cool stuff. And If you have anything that you are really eager about, and I've heard a couple of things, like people would like to have coffee cups, and I would like to have a nice cap, just let us know, and we'll see what we can do it for you. Then next point, hiring. So n8n is growing quite fast this year, and if you look at n8n.com/careers, you will see like an almost monthly changing list of job positions that we have for you. At the moment, we are looking for people to help us in sales and products. We're looking for a senior finance manager, looking for 2 AI engineers and a backend engineer. And now all of these roles are remote and based in Europe, except for the sales development representative. That's a job that's based in Berlin. Yeah, and if I can sell this a little bit more, n8n is a great team to work for. So if you're interested, you should definitely do it. We're about to leave for a couple of days of offsite in Berlin with the entire team. So you might also notice that we might be a little bit slow responding to questions for the next couple of days. But yeah, you'll hear more about what we did afterwards, I suppose. With that said, and I'm probably jumping to, yeah, this is right. Product update time. So last meetup in March, Nick was talking to you guys about the Creator Hub, and there was a lot of interest in paid templates. And I'm happy to say that this is live now. If you're a creator on the hub, you now have the option to add a purchase URL to your products and a price. And so when people find your template and they click on the button, what happens is we take you to that destination site. So it could be Gumroad, it could be any kind of digital content platform where you can make sales. And the transaction takes place there. So n8n is not taking a cut out of your sale in any way, but it's up to you to set the price and to negotiate terms with the provider there. We are still thinking about giving guidance about prices or good products, etc. So stuff like that will come naturally, but for now we'll be looking at what's happening, who is selling at what price point, what the volume is, etc. Until we can start giving you some advice about that. Also realize that if you want to sell something, it really is up to you to promote that as well. So we might feature your template and it might pop up on social media, but that's not a given. So if you want to be successful, you need to do your own marketing, right? And share it on your social media or your website or wherever you're active and you meet people. So that's the first one. Then second update is our new affiliate platform is live. So we have moved from Tap Affiliate to PartnerStack. And this means we have a much more robust affiliate platform in place. So Tap Affiliate sometimes had issues where it missed transactions, and we would manually fix that, but it was annoying and it was a little scary for the affiliates. And we find that PartnerStack is much more robust and it's giving us some more options for future growth as well. As always, you get 50% commission on the first year of revenue from any new clients that you refer. So it is very, very profitable, very interesting proposition, I think. And if you are interested, you can visit n8n.io/affiliates to see more information. Also, if you're an existing affiliate, we have already migrated your accounts and we have communicated to you about that. There is a migration guide that's also available on the link that I'm just showing here. And so everything should work pretty smooth and seamless. Can we reach these? Good. So, okay. Then further product updates. Of the last month, we implemented 3 new trigger nodes. So now you can use OneDrive, Salesforce, and Twilio to trigger your workflows. These were the nodes that were in high demand, and we saw a lot of users using HTTP nodes, for example, or webhooks to drive these automations. And so this made sense for us to fix that. Hang on, there you go. Next product updates. We implemented a couple of usability improvements. You may have already noticed it since these are in production already, but we improved the autocomplete for expressions. So now it's much smarter, giving you the right suggestions for the type of data that you are looking at. It will give you the right functions to use and better documentation. And we have also added a way to view earlier nodes in your workflow, so it's easier to get data from previous nodes there. And we gave it a general touch up as well, so everything looks a bit more clean. And also we improved the error display, so we're adding more information. We are showing, for example, your n8n version, your node version, etc. And that's relevant because there's now a little copy button, and here, if you copy that, it will copy the entire error report, so you can share it with support or on the forum. So that's going to be a lot easier to get help with your issue, and it's going to save us a lot of time asking for stuff as well. Let me just rearrange my screen. Okay, now to the stuff that's in progress. So this is not available yet. This is still under construction. The HTTP nodes that we're going to be talking about later as well is one of our most popular nodes because it allows you to extend n8n. But it's also kind of a barrier for people who are not that technical. And so we've been thinking about ways to use AI to improve the experience here. And what you're seeing here is currently in development. So basically how it works is on the HTTP request node, there will be an Ask AI button. And if you click it, it will ask you which service you want to work with. So in my case, Notion, and what kind of request you want to make. And you can just describe that in natural language. So here I'm saying search for pages containing BART. And then it will think for a little bit and come up with the following settings here. And you will notice that it adds the right request method, URL. It adds the authorization fields that it needs and the request itself. And so it's pretty reliable. It just doesn't just make this up. We trained it on 600 supported services, so it knows what it's talking about. If you ask outside of these services, things get a little wonky, but that's what AI does. Another thing that we did is if I was to click test this step right now without setting the bearer token, for example, I would obviously get an error. Like here, authorization fails, that makes sense, right? And we also added an Ask AI feature here, because now we know that we're working with Notion, it can give you tailored advice here. So after thinking for a little bit, AI will come up with this text explaining that you need to add a token and how to do it. And if you scroll down, it will link you to the right page on the Notion website to get the token, etc. So I think that's very exciting, and that's going to make working with this node a lot easier. As I said, it's still in development, so I do not have a timeline for you when this will be available. So for now, it's still up to you to figure out how to use the HTTP nodes and how to structure your API requests. And that is exactly what our next speaker will be talking about. But before I switch to him, I'm curious if there's any questions. And I saw a lot of chat here, but I do not have any questions here. Luis, do you have anything for me?
I was looking at it. Probably the main one is if we can add training to our own APIs, which I think the answer is not for now. We are just exploring this for internal use cases and from the HTTP node, no, right?
Yeah. I had this discussion before today, and I feel that if you understand the API well enough to train your own API on it, you probably don't need to ask AI to fix your HTTP requests anymore. Does that make sense? The make.com to n8n converter or any kind of service to n8n, I suppose. I know we've done a couple of experiments with that. It would be really interesting, but it's also really hard to do it well. And I think what we learned so far is that converting entire scenarios is quite complex, and converting nodes one by one is going to give you more success. So maybe that will be a first step at some point. Yeah, there is a list of supported services. As I said, there's about 600, and I saw that list today. I suppose that will be published. Right now, you need to add to manual, like the name of the service is a text field. And I think it probably makes more sense to make that like a selection at some point, so that you can only select from the data it has been trained on. And if it will continue to be added to, I can only assume we will keep improving that if it becomes a successful feature. Yeah. Yeah, and the Ask AI on community versions, that is we had the same question for the code node, where you also have Ask AI currently only on the cloud. I know the team has been discussing it. There's a couple of questions around it still. I mean, you could, of course, enter your own OpenAI API key, for example, but then you would still need to have the vector database with the trained information, right? So it's not just the API key. We need to provide more information so you can insert it into your own database before you could use the AI. So there's always more questions when you think about features like this, like how can we make this easy? How can we make this affordable for people, etc. But it is a point of discussion, and I assume that at some point we'll consider the same thing for Ask AI in other areas of the tool. Yeah. Injecting Swagger JSON when Ask AI. Probably, I don't know. Any other questions?
No more questions, Bart.
No more questions?
Yep.
All right. Well, then that means it is time for our next speaker, or our first speaker, Amudan. Are you here?
Hi, Bart.
Hey,
Hello.
there you go. Yeah, I will stop sharing my screen now, and you can take over.
Okay, so let me just begin by sharing my screen here. Is it visible?
Yep, there you go.
Yep. So hello everyone. I am Amudan, and I have been a long-time user of n8n since the early days. And so I think one of the most versatile nodes is the HTTP node, right? You can do a lot with it, but today we are specifically going to look at two different problems or two different cases where the HTTP node becomes really, really useful. And that's when you want to use it to implement or add a function to your workflow that an existing node does not already have. And also when you want to say, bring some data in or talk to another application for which, there is no native n8n node, right? And the HTTP node is obviously not limited to this functionality, and you can do other things with it like web scraping, but today this is what we're focusing on. So let's jump in. But before we go in, quick thing that most of you may already be familiar with, but is worth mentioning, is a quick refresher on APIs. So very simply put, an API is a way for different applications to talk to each other, and usually it is through a standardized format, which these days tends to be JSON. And there's different types of APIs, but what is most relevant here today is HTTP or RESTful HTTP APIs. And there are some methods that you can use to interact with APIs, and I have listed some most common ones that are most frequently used, and you can see them listed here. So there's GET, which is normally used to read data from an API. POST, which is used to kind of ask a question or send data or write data using an API, and often you receive a response for the data that you send. A put and a patch are both very similar. A put request is used to replace existing data that is that the API is serving to you. A patch request can be sent to update data, and delete is, well, it's very self-explanatory. It can be used to delete data. And this becomes important because standards compliant APIs all follow these request patterns, and those are what we will be using in our examples. And when you build a workflow, you will need to set these up to talk to these different services that you want to connect with your workflow, right? And so I think it's easy to break this down into a set of steps, a playbook for you to follow, if you will. So the first thing that you want to do, say you have an application and you want to do something with it that n8n does not currently support. The first thing you want to do is find out if there is an API, right? And you can do this by simply going in to the application documentation or the website of the service that you're trying to connect to, and start looking for API documentation. And the next thing you want to do is, once you've determined that there is an API for you to connect to n8n, you want to make sure that there is some kind. Most APIs implement some kind of authentication, so you want to understand how to authenticate with that API in case it is necessary. The third thing is find the specific function that you need. Say, for example, you want to send a message, or you want to pause Spotify, and right now n8n has it, but if you want, you have to make sure that the function or the thing you're trying to do is supported by the API. And then you just create that request in n8n. And we're going to look at examples and screenshots for each of these steps. And then we're going to look at an example that adds functions to n8n for a node that already exists, and for a function to talk to an application that does not have a native node for n8n, right? So like I mentioned before, the easiest way to find out if there is an API is you can check the website, you can read the application documentation, and normally you will find things about the API under the developer section or the integration section. And more often than not, you can just do a Google search for the name of whatever you want to connect and just add API or API documentation, and Google should just find it for you. Here is a quick video of me finding the API for an application called Outline. It's a wiki app that I tend to use, and this is something that you will see in other examples as well. So you can see that I was able to go to the website and find the developer section, and I've also done a Google search, Outline Wiki API, and the first result takes me directly to all of the documentation about the API. So from there, I can start to read it and find the functions that I need, right? But before we do that, we need to make sure we have access to the API. And there's two ways right now in n8n's HTTP request node that you can do this. So if you are accessing the API of an application for which n8n already has a node, then there is an option that says use predefined credentials. And you can just select that and pick from your existing credentials. An example of this that you will see later in this presentation is Mattermost. You can just use those credentials to make a request to that API. If you're trying to connect to an app that does not have a node, then you have to find the authentication information in the API documentation and then replicate that setup in n8n. So here I have a screen recording of me again with Outline Wiki, creating, finding the authentication and demonstrating how to create the authentication in the HTTP request node. So you can see I'm highlighting the relevant information as you can go. It says that it needs header authentication using a bearer token, and that you can create that key in the account settings. So I'm going to go into the wiki app, go into the preferences, API tokens, and I'm going to create a token. I'm going to give it a name, and I've created that. I'm going to copy that token and then go into n8n and create a new HTTP request node. And under authentication, select generic credential type, header authentication, because that's what we saw in the documentation. And I'm going to give it a friendly name. And you can authorization, and you can see that you need it to be authorization, and then I'm typing in here bearer space, and I'm pasting the API key that I copied from the application, and that's it, right? And you can follow similar steps for any application that you want to connect with an n8n. Just select the appropriate authentication method. Here it was header auth. Select the appropriate one, and then just take the information from the app and put it in. And then the next step, of course, is then to go through the API documentation and find out the function that you want it to do. So in the example I'm showing today, since I'm demonstrating with a wiki application, I'm going to search for a document with keywords, right? And I'm looking for, in my wiki, a branding guideline that was written a while ago. And so this is the API documentation for searching all of the documents in my wiki. And these are all the options that you can use. And you can see at the end of the screenshot that it's a post request and the endpoint is documents.search. And the endpoint is the URL that you make the HTTP request to for that specific function. And you'll see me do that in this example here. So in this workflow, I am implementing not one, but two requests for the same app, one which searches for all results and then retrieves the first search result from the wiki, right? So let's take a look. So you can see that it should say documents.search, and there's the endpoint URL I'm using, and I'm selecting the API credential I've already created. And I'm making sure that I'm specifying a query parameter that's as mentioned in the API documentation. And I'm searching for the word brand guideline. And you can see that I'm getting search results. And then I'm using another API call to the same API to retrieve that document. And I've taken the document ID from my previous request and passed it on to this one. So this is a good example of when you can also connect multiple HTTP request nodes to accomplish, a series of things. Say there is an app that you really need multiple functions with that no node is available for. This is something that you can do, right? So this is an example of how to utilize an HTTP request node for an application that does not have a node at all. It is rather straightforward and simple, as you can see, and I hope that you all give it a try. The next example is going to be for using HTTP request to perform a function for which that's not available in the native n8n node. So like I've talked about it earlier. So here what I'm doing is I have a Slack workspace that we use, and we also have a Mattermost chat application that we talk on. But sometimes, when say I take a lunch break, I update my Slack status to say that I'm away, but I may not do so in the other app, right? And it can be quite a hassle. And n8n does have a Mattermost node, but it does not support the function to update your status, right? So this is a workflow that will mirror my Slack status into Mattermost every 5 minutes. And so if I'm away for lunch in the next 5 minutes, this workflow should run and automatically let people know that I'm away, right? So let's take a look at that. So you can see the workflow already here. I'm showing here the API request. Let me just pause it. So this URL is the Mattermost API endpoint for setting setting a custom status, right? And if you go down, you can see that I am passing an emoji and a text. So which is, the the icon and the message that is displayed in your status. And the other one is presence. So that's basically the little green circle that says you're online or offline. Interestingly, in Slack and Mattermost, these are two separate things. And you can see here that I'm demonstrating here that the statuses are, different and online on either application. And I'm going to go ahead now in Slack, update my status to say I'm going to rest and change my icon to a bed. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to change my little online green thing to, say that I'm away. And then when I run this workflow, it should get that status and presence from Slack and then replicate it on Mattermost. And if you see that, it says the same thing and says that I'm away, right? So this is an example of using the HTTP request node to just extend an existing node's function. And one key thing that I want to demonstrate here that I may not have pointed out before is if you can see this HTTP request node that I'm using for Mattermost, as opposed to the first example, here I am using authentication as the predefined credential type. So I'm not manually creating any authentication, but rather I'm using the authentication and the credentials that I've already saved for the built-in Mattermost node. So that's one key thing that I want to point out here. I have not here, shown demonstrated, pulling the Mattermost API documentation or, finding that endpoint, but it is very straightforward for most APIs that are documented. And you can just run a similar search and then try a similar workflow out for yourself, right? And for the last example, this is more of a an edge case, so to speak.
I'm done. One comment. We're running a little bit out of time, so if you could speed this part up a little bit, that would be great.
Yes, of course. So this is about dealing with pagination and rate limiting. So sometimes APIs don't return, all the possible data, and they return it in smaller chunks because it would be impossible to return a huge data set. And the way they handle this is by returning chunks of data, and this is called pagination. And this video is an example of a workflow that pulls, posts from the n8n community forum that says, the tag cloud and just, displays them. It iterates through them, different pages, and pulls those posts out. And there's a timeout for 5 seconds to prevent the community forum itself from blocking us with something that's called rate limiting. But let's just jump right in here, and you can see that there's the request that's created. And the query parameter is page, and you can specify the item that you need to iterate upon.
Can you maximize the video for us?
Oh, yes. Sorry. I think, sorry. Yep, here we go.
Thanks.
And yeah, so I'm just going to skip through the execution part because that's just a lot of waiting, and skip here through the output. And you can see that, there it has fetched six different times from the API, which is why it says there are 6 items. And it has fetched, different users and posts that have been made under the cloud tag on the community forum. So this is an example of, something that's a little more advanced or complicated, like an edge case that you may have to deal with, which is pagination and rate limiting. But I think I'm running out of time now, so let's end. You can find me as SM Amudan on the community forum, and feel free to ask me any questions. But do we have any time for questions?
Yes, we do. Thanks, Mudan. This was really great. Great examples too. I liked the synchronization of the statuses there. We have 2 questions. I think you kind of touched on the second one already. The first one, hang on, let me just go back to sharing my screen.
Yes.
First one
Do you
is...
need me to stop? Okay.
Oh, no, that's fine. First question is, can we use the HTTP node with APIs that uses OAuth? And I think it's kind of related to the second one, right? The difference between generic and predefined authentication.
Yes. Yes, you can use HTTP node with APIs that use OAuth. And if you're doing it for a node that already uses OAuth, you can do the predefined authentication. And if you are not, then you can go into generic, and then you can select OAuth and OAuth2 as a type. And then you can put in your client ID, client secret, and you have to, of course, configure n8n with n8n's callback URL that is provided in the other side. And you can totally do that and connect your account. That's possible. And you can find the documentation on the n8n website. It's quite clear. The next question I'm seeing is, what is the difference between generic and predefined authentication? Predefined authentication is a way for you to reuse saved credentials from existing nodes. So in my example, I had a Mattermost node, but I also used the HTTP request node to make a request to Mattermost API. But instead of configuring a separate credential again just for that HTTP request, I just used those same credentials that was saved for the Mattermost node. That's predefined authentication. Generic authentication is when you configure something that for a node that's not already there, and you might have to do it for every single HTTP request node, and there is not much reusability. Any other questions?
No, I think that's it. Luis, any last minute additions?
No new ones. Some conversations in the threads there in the chat, but I think those were the main ones.
Thanks. Okay.
All right.
Well, Amudan, this was a great introduction. Thanks for this overview, and I'm sure we can reuse this video for a lot of people afterwards as well. With that said, let's switch over to our second speaker, Bram, who's going to be looking at how to create custom nodes and why you should or shouldn't do it. Bram, I'm going to stop my share now.
Hello.
Floor is yours.
Let's see if this is going to work, and of course it will. So you have seen how to use the HTTP node. Seems complicated if you're not that technical. So what do you do if there's no native apps or no native nodes for your app? Of course, you can not automate it.
Not accessible.
We'll skip that. You can find a community node. There's 563, at least when I created this thing. That's plenty, I think. There's also more nodes coming pretty much every day, so maybe it's more. You can use the HTTP node, like was just shown. That's a little bit complicated for some things, but sometimes the API is fine and can easily be used. Depends on documentation, of course, and on your level of expertise. But you can also develop your own node. You can do this for APIs, but you can also do it for logic. So for example, if you have a little bit of code where you do some modification of the data or stuff like that, you can also just create a node for that. One example is, for example, the node that we created to compare two sets of JSON, where you actually just you push in two data sets and then the comparison is revealed. That was made with an external package, making it very easy. And if you do not have the capability or the time to create your own nodes, you can also hire someone like me or one of the other partners or developers that are available to create your nodes. So of course, always a choice. As you can see, there's a lot of nodes. You can find them on NPM. Pretty much all of them should be open because that's NPM, of course. There's also some duplicates. So, for example, at Discord, we'll probably have more than one node, probably more than 5, actually. So then you have to choose what works best for you. Of course, you can just test them out and see how it works and if it's doing what you want, or even install multiple if one has the one function, the other has some other function that you want to use. There's plenty to choose. I get asked a lot if they should develop a node for my clients. There are some pros and cons, of course, and it's basically these things. So the usability is, of course, a lot better if you have just a node. Then almost everyone can use it, so you don't have to do all those things like was just shown. It makes it a lot simpler for the less technical people. And of course, you can then reuse it and use it easily. You only have to research the API once, as you have seen with Amudan. If you have to search the API if you need a new functionality, and for example, if it's like 3 months later, good luck, because then you have to pretty much start from scratch. At least I don't remember a lot of things 3 months later. So if you create a node, you only have to research everything once, because you're diving into it, you're creating the node, and everything is in it, right? Of course, maybe not with all the functionality, but probably with all the functionality that you're actually going to use. And as well, the credentials, Amudan also showed you that you can use predefined credentials. It's very nice to just create your own node, have your credentials in there, and everything works. Sometimes an API is fairly annoying with their credentials, and then it's very easy to just have it in a node and it works instead of having your having your generic credentials. Even some options are not possible in the generic credentials, and then you can add those things in the custom credentials as well. There's of course some cons. Yeah, it takes a lot of time to create a node. Depends on your skill level and experience with creating nodes, of course, and also how much functionality you're gonna put in it. But of course, you can just have it be done by someone else, and then it might take less time of your own time at least. And you cannot start automatic directly, because of course the node needs to be created. So if you need something quick, then you'll just use the HTTP node, and it will be fine. So the flexibility is also, of course, an issue, or at least not an issue, but if you need to add some functionality, that's going to be annoying to to add, because the guy that created the node has to add it then. So that's a bit of an annoyance, but you can use the HTTP request node, as Amudan showed, to use at least the same credentials, and everything is set up. And then you just have to do that one thing with the HTTP request node. And of course, if it's something that you need to do once and it's not too big of a deal, you cannot have it be put into the node itself. That's of course a choice you can make. And for the logic nodes, there's pretty much the basic or the same pros and cons. But you have also the reusability, because of course, if you use code and, for example, with parameters that you can change and then reuse the code somewhere or whatever, for a less technical person, having them going into the code, changing something, and then moving ahead with that, that's not going to happen probably, or at least it will only cause issues, or at least in my experience. Which causes more time to fix it and debugging and stuff like that. So that's very annoying. So for the logic as well, it's very nice to just create a node out of it. It doesn't have to be very difficult, like I just said as well with the JSON compare node. There's simply an external package. You can just make sure that's installed with the node, that you just have the options for that, and then you can just use that. So the JSON compare node, I think, was created in like 2 or 3 hours. And that was while also talking to the person I was making it for, talking and explaining how it works and stuff like that. It can go very fast, and it's very useful. So if you have stuff like that, then it can be worth it to just create it and then use that. And of course, flexibility again, but yeah, you can use the code note for that and stuff. Sadly, n8n Cloud doesn't support community notes. I had to include it. I'm sorry for the n8n team, but I have to do it.
It's fair. We know.
I really want to promote cloud more, but yeah, I'm a big user of community nodes and stuff. So yeah,
and we are aware, of course, right? So we are having conversations about how to fix this. There's obviously some security issues around this that give us pause. However, we are working on a lot of infrastructure improvements, and with luck, we can actually support custom nodes on cloud later as well.
That would be perfect, because then I can finally push some of my clients to cloud because they don't need their own server. But yeah, oh well. So how do we get started if you have a node you want to create? I'm not going through the whole thing because there's enough documentation and there's a video of Marcus doing it and everything. So I'm just gonna do a few little things and some tips. There is a node starter, which is actually perfect because I've always used it. When I started creating nodes, there wasn't a node starter, but now there is. So since it was there, I've used it. You can just go to the GitHub page and then use this template. Then you get a copy of the repo. There's two different nodes in there as an example. So the programmatic style one and the declarative style one. I've never used the declarative style, so I cannot even help you with that. Because when I started creating nodes, it wasn't an option. So I stick with what I have learned in the past. So you basically get this template and then remove the one that you don't want. So for example, if you want the programmatic style one, then you keep the example node and remove the HTTP bin node. After that, make sure to go with baby steps. So for example, if you start with starter, just make sure to delete everything you don't need. So the other node, and maybe if you're doing a logic node, remove the credentials, stuff like that, and change the names of the node and the parameters that needs to be changed, and just test if it works. Because the example node should work out of the box with the template, of course. So make sure it still works after you change the names and stuff like that, and the logo maybe. Just make sure it works before you even start building the node itself. And then design the node before you actually start building the functionality inside it. Because if you just start coding away, you might recognize it if you have coded anything. It's gonna get messy very fast. So just make sure you know what to build, and then build it. I always start with the UI because then you get a feeling of all the things that you want to be able to do with it. Makes you also think about those things. So if you are not designing it per se at the start, then the UI will force you to still think about the actual functionalities. And after that, you can just create the functionality like the API calls or the logic or whatever you need. And do not reinvent the wheel. I am not actually a programmer. I used to be a BI consultant, know a lot of scripting and stuff like that, but I'm not a programmer. I can do it a bit. You just grab whatever you need because all the source code is available. So you can just peek into the code of the nodes that have the certain options that you need. So for example, if you need the button with options, with a bit of multiple options that you can select and stuff like that, just grab it from a node that you already know that it has it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And saves a lot of time and hassle and stuff like that. Are there any questions?
There are. I have 2 questions here on the list so far. Well, one is a suggestion. Let me start with the question. Can I create private community nodes as well? So do you always need to publish them to NPM, or are there other delivery methods?
You don't have to publish them. You just have to make sure you install them with n8n when you want to use them. That's a question I always ask my clients. Do you want to publish them? And I always recommend just publish them because it's easier to install them if you do. And it's also just giving back to the community. So like 90% just want me to publish them after.
Nice. That's really cool. Yeah. And the second one is a suggestion, which I think is interesting, that says it would be very nice if you could simply convert the code node into a custom node so that you could predefine inputs. At the moment, I make do with creating a corresponding workflow and executing it either via HTTP node or execute workflow node. So that's kind of an interesting idea. So you could like convert it into a ready to use or share.
Yeah, I actually created a node which started as a logger node where you can put parameters in, and then it will run a sub workflow. And then you can choose if it returns the data from the sub workflow or it doesn't. And you let it not do that if you just log it, because then it will just continue the flow and it has logged some data, for example. But you can use that sort of a function node where you can just put the parameters in and then move to a subflow and then grab those parameters, do something with a code, for example. And if you make that smart enough with expressions and stuff like that, you can basically create whatever you want inside that sub workflow. And then it's also not bound to the code node.
So it's already doable then.
If you are not in cloud.
Yes. I know. Okay. Next question. It's a bit long. Regarding custom nodes, are there any plans to add JS doc strings to the different interfaces and properties in the n8n base? That can be difficult to understand what the different property values are, etc. That's really a question for our product and engineering team. I do not have an answer for you, but we can definitely look into that and share more information.
One for the forum.
Yeah, exactly. Unless there is someone from those teams online who can jump in real quick now. No, not even John knows. It happens. It happens.
He's still in my chat.
Okay, last question I have here is there documentation for the API to custom nodes? For example, node API error is a document apart from in the n8n.io code.
Sorry, what?
I don't really follow this question. Is there documentation for the API to custom nodes? For example, node API error. Again, let's look into that, and we can post about it on the forum afterwards.
If it's about a code that you have to use for the errors, you can just steal it from other nodes. That's basically how I do it.
Okay. All right, that's the questions I have here. Unless there's more, Luis, are we all good?
Yeah, all good. Those are all the ones.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, Bram, this is where you do your pitch for your services.
No, I just have it on the screen, and you can email me if you need me.
All right. Well, everyone already knows you, I suppose, right? So, awesome. Thanks to both the speakers. You were amazing, and you gave really great information for everyone. So, with that said, where did my screen go? Ah, here. All right, so that's it for today. This is the end of the official part of the meetup. I'll stop the recording after this, and then we can have a bit of chat time after that. If you would like to speak on this Hangout next time, contact me at bart@n8n.io, or if you have a suggestion for topics or any other ideas, we'd love to hear them. So let me know, and that's it for now. Thanks again, speakers. Amazing. Thanks for your hard work there. And we'll see you guys again next month.